I still remember the exact moment I stopped seeing my girlfriend as the girl I wanted to marry and started seeing her as a stranger I had wasted 2 years on. For context, this all happened during my junior year of college. I was 21, majoring in mechanical engineering, and my life revolved around classes, labs, coffee, and trying not to collapse from exhaustion. My girlfriend, Emma, was 20, studying marketing, and on paper we were the kind of couple everyone thought was solid. We'd been together since the end of freshman year. We went through stupid late-night diner runs, exam stress, bad dorm food, family drama, and the usual college chaos. People always said we looked healthy, which is funny now, because behind the scenes I was slowly getting played like an idiot. Emma was smart, funny, and honestly out of my league in a way I never said out loud. She had this effortless confidence that made people like her almost immediately. I was more quiet, more structured, more the guy who showed up early and took notes while everyone else joked around. Somehow, she liked that about me. She said I was safe in the best possible way, which I took as a compliment at the time. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it felt real. Or at least I thought it was. We had our arguments, but nothing major. Mostly normal stuff. She'd forget plans, I'd get too focused on school, she'd get annoyed that I didn't text fast enough, I'd get annoyed that she treated last-minute cancellations like they were no big deal. Still, every couple has those things, right? That's what I kept telling myself. The first weird thing happened in early October. Emma started acting different, but not in a way that would make someone immediately panic. It was more subtle than that. She got more protective of her phone. Not in an obvious, cartoonish way where she'd snatch it out of your hand, but enough that it stood out to me because she had never cared before. She used to leave it on the table, let it buzz while we were eating, laugh about random notifications. Then suddenly she was turning it face down, taking it to the bathroom, and lowering her screen brightness all the time. When I asked her what was up, she said she was just trying to be present more and didn't want to be one of those people glued to her phone 24/7. That sounded reasonable, so I let it go. She also started saying she had more group project meetings than usual. Since she was in marketing, I figured maybe that was true. But the timing was weird. Every Wednesday and Friday evening, she'd say she was meeting classmates, and every Saturday she seemed to have some excuse for being unavailable for a few hours. She'd say things like, "I need to run by the library with Maya," or "I'm helping with a presentation," or "I promised I'd stop by the student center." The names changed enough that it was impossible to pin anything down. Meanwhile, I was buried under a brutal lab schedule. I had a partner named Ryan, who was one of the few guys in my program I actually trusted. We worked well together, and after a while we became friends. Not best friends, but close enough to grab food after labs and complain about professors together. He was the kind of guy who was always upbeat, always joking, always the first one to say, "We'll survive this." Emma met him a couple times because he came with me to a study group once, and they got along fine. Maybe too fine, in hindsight. At the time I didn't think much of it. He was engaged in a different relationship, or so he said, and Emma liked people who could make her laugh. I figured that was all it was. Then came the first real red flag. One night, Emma told me she was crashing at a friend's apartment after a late group meeting because it was too late to drive back. That sounded odd because she lived in the same city as campus, just 20 minutes away. Still, I said okay and told her to be safe. The next morning, I saw a snap she posted on her private story. It was a blurry mirror selfie in a hallway that looked familiar, and behind her, half cut off, I could make out a framed poster from our campus student center. What made me pause was the time stamp. She had posted it at 1:13 a.m. That wasn't impossible, but it didn't match her story about being at a friend's apartment. I didn't confront her right away because I didn't want to sound paranoid over one blurry photo. But then a few days later, Ryan casually mentioned that he'd been at the student center late that same night helping with a thing for marketing kids. He said it like it was nothing, but my stomach dropped because Emma had told me she was at a friend's place. I asked her about it later, and she gave me a half laugh, half eye roll and said, "I was at the student center for a bit, then I went to Nina's after." "Why are you acting weird?" That was the first time she made me feel like I was the problem. Not aggressively. Just enough to make me doubt myself. Over the next couple of weeks, the pattern got worse. Less time together. More unexplained delays. More "I forgot to tell you" moments. More vague explanations. She was still affectionate when we were alone, still kissed me goodbye, still sent me little good morning texts like nothing had changed. That's what made it so hard to read. If she had suddenly gone cold, I might have confronted it faster. Instead, she gave me just enough warmth to keep me from leaving. Then one Thursday, I accidentally found the first real piece of evidence. I was in the library finishing a report when Emma sat across from me for a while before heading to a meeting. She left her tote bag on the chair for maybe 30 seconds while she went to grab water. Her phone was inside, and it buzzed several times in a row. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I picked it up because the screen lit up with a notification from Ryan. Not a random message. A preview of a text that said, "Same place tonight." I'm already thinking about last time. My brain just stopped. I stared at the screen like it was going to change if I looked hard enough. The words were right there. No ambiguity. No harmless explanation. Same place tonight. Last time. Emma came back before I could do anything, and I just handed her the phone with what I'm sure was the worst expression of my life. She took one look at my face and instantly knew something was wrong. "What?" she said. "Ryan texted you," I said. "What does last time mean?" The color left her face for maybe half a second, then she recovered fast. She laughed. Actually laughed. "You went through my phone." "I didn't go through it. The message popped up." "That's still invasive." I just stood there. I think I actually blinked a few times because I couldn't believe the direction she was taking this. "So you're not going to answer the question?" She crossed her arms and said, "It's about the presentation. We were meeting at the same place twice and he was joking." "You think I'm stupid?" Her expression changed instantly from annoyed to offended, like I had insulted her instead of asking a very normal question. "You're being paranoid because you have trust issues," she snapped. "I can't have a private conversation with a classmate without you spiraling." That was the moment she turned it around on me so smoothly that for a second I almost believed I was overreacting. Almost. She grabbed her bag and walked out of the library before I could say anything else. I sat there for 10 minutes feeling sick. I remember looking around at everyone studying like normal humans while my life was apparently imploding in silence. I didn't text her that night. She texted me first, around midnight, with, "I'm hurt that you don't trust me. If you keep accusing me, this relationship isn't going to work." That message made me angrier than the actual flirting text. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was so calculated. She wasn't denying anything. She was punishing me for noticing. So I did what any unhealthy, confused, hurt college guy would do. I started paying attention. I didn't snoop through her whole life or become some creepy detective, but I began noticing details. She told me she had a marketing group project on Tuesdays, but Ryan was conveniently free every Tuesday night. She said she was studying with girls from her class, but her location would sometimes show her near the engineering building, where Ryan had his lab. She'd mention names of people I knew from her classes, but if I asked follow-up questions later, she'd get irritated and say I was interrogating her. The final straw came 2 weeks later. Ryan and I were in lab, and he seemed unusually nervous. Not guilty exactly, just off. He kept checking his phone and couldn't stop grinning at random messages. I asked him what was up, and he said nothing. Then, when he thought I wasn't looking, he stepped outside to take a call. He left his laptop open. I'm not saying I'm proud of this, but the screen had a group chat visible for a second before it dimmed. I saw Emma's name. Ryan's name. And one line that made my stomach fall through the floor. Don't worry, he still doesn't know. I stared at it. Then I looked around to see if anyone noticed me looking. Nobody had. By the time Ryan came back in, my hands were shaking. I didn't say anything then. I needed proof, and more than that, I needed to know the full scope of it. Because some part of me still hoped there was some horrible misunderstanding that could be explained away. That night, I waited until Emma said she was going to a birthday thing with classmates. She had barely left before I called Nina, one of her friends who I knew liked me and had always been honest with me. I didn't accuse Emma right away. I just asked casually if she was with them. Nina went silent for a second too long. Then she said, "Wait, she told you she was with us." I felt my entire body go cold. Why? Nina hesitated. Because she's not. She said she was going out with Ryan. I think I actually said, "What?" out loud so loudly that my roommate looked up from his desk. Nina sounded uncomfortable after that. She said she didn't want to get involved, but Emma had been acting weird for weeks and people had noticed. She didn't say everything, but she said enough. Enough to confirm that Emma had been lying constantly, and enough to make it obvious that Ryan was not just a random classmate. I thanked Nina and hung up. Then I sat on my bed for a full hour, numb with that awful mix of anger, humiliation, and disbelief that only happens when someone you love has been lying to your face for months. I kept thinking back to all the times Emma had looked me in the eyes and told me I was overthinking things. All the times I'd apologized for being paranoid. All the times I'd swallowed my instincts because I wanted to be the kind of boyfriend who trusted his girlfriend. At 1:04 a.m., I got a text from Emma. "Can I come over?" That was strange because she almost never asked to come over late unless she was upset. I texted back, "Why?" She replied, "I just need to talk." I should have said no. But I was so angry by then that I wanted the truth in front of me, not hidden behind screens and half-lies. So I said yes. She showed up 20 minutes later looking exhausted and stressed, like she'd been crying. She walked into my room, sat down, and immediately started with the exact line I had half expected. "You've been acting really controlling lately." I just stared at her. She took that as permission to continue. "You don't trust me, you check up on me, and you're making me feel like I'm doing something wrong when I'm not." That was when I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I was in that weird emotional state where the truth is so absurd that your brain gives up and laughs instead. She looked offended. "What? Don't do that," I said. "Don't come in here and pretend I'm crazy." "I'm not pretending anything." "Then explain Ryan." She froze. Not a long freeze. Just enough. I leaned forward and said, "Explain the message. Explain the group chat. Explain why Nina just told me you weren't with her tonight." Emma's face changed from defensive to scared to angry in about 3 seconds. "You called Nina?" she said. "Answer the question." She stood up and started pacing, which was when I knew she wasn't going to deny it anymore. She didn't say, "I didn't cheat." She didn't say, "You misunderstood." She didn't even try to pretend anymore. Instead she said, "It just happened." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. "Just happened?" I repeated. She nodded, staring at the floor. "It was a mistake," she said. "Ryan and I got close because we were working together, and things got messy. But it wasn't supposed to be serious." I remember feeling a kind of cold rage I'd never felt before. It wasn't the loud kind of anger. It was the kind where everything inside you goes very quiet. "So how long?" I asked. She wouldn't look at me. "How long, Emma?" "Since September." September. We were in October. That meant she had been cheating on me for over a month, probably longer if I counted the emotional stuff before that. Every time she kissed me. Every time she told me she loved me. Every time she acted offended that I doubted her. She had known exactly what she was doing. I asked the next question because I needed to know, even though I already hated the answer. "Did you sleep with him?" She finally looked at me, and her silence answered for her. I actually felt something in my chest break. I stood up and walked to the door. She started crying then, suddenly, like my pain had only become real once I stopped being useful. "Please, don't do this," she said. "I didn't mean to hurt you." That line made me stop and look at her. "You didn't mean to hurt me," I said. "What did you think was going to happen?" She had no answer for that. I told her to leave. She begged for a minute. Then another. Then she started saying she was scared, that Ryan had made her feel seen, that our relationship had been getting stale, that I had been distant because of school, that she didn't know how to end it, that she still cared about me, that she was confused. It was like watching someone toss every excuse at a wall and hope one of them would stick. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just told her one more time to get out. When she finally left, I locked the door and sat on the floor for a long time, just staring at nothing. I didn't sleep. I didn't even cry at first. I think I was too shocked. It was like my whole relationship had been a fake wall that had suddenly collapsed. The next morning, I sent Ryan one text. "I know." He replied almost immediately. "About what?" I said. "About you and Emma." He never answered. A few hours later, he blocked me. That should have been enough, but the way I was feeling, I needed one final confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. So I screenshot the messages I had from Emma, the group chat preview I saw from Ryan, and the texts Nina sent me. Then I called Emma and told her I wanted the truth in writing. If she was going to keep pretending, I wanted no more room for denial. She called me crying an hour later and admitted everything in pieces. She said Ryan had been pursuing her for weeks, that she felt lonely, that our relationship had felt routine, that she made a stupid mistake and couldn't figure out how to stop once it started. Then she asked if there was any way to fix it. I told her no. Not because I was trying to be dramatic. Because I meant it. There are some things you cannot come back from. Cheating is already one of them for me, but the bigger issue was the lying. The gaslighting. The way she made me feel crazy for noticing obvious signs. If she had come to me honestly at any point and said she was unhappy, maybe we could have ended it like adults. Instead, she dragged me through a month of lies and then expected forgiveness because she finally felt guilty. I ended things that day. Then I changed my schedule so I wouldn't have to see Ryan in lab more than necessary, and I told a few close friends the truth before the rumor mill could do whatever it wanted. I kept it simple. Emma had been cheating on me with Ryan, and I was done. Most people reacted with shock, then anger on my behalf. A few said they never liked him anyway. One person told me they saw it coming because Emma had been different for a while. That was almost worse, honestly. Because it meant everyone else had noticed too. A couple weeks later, I found out Emma and Ryan had already imploded. Apparently once the secrecy and excitement wore off, the relationship wasn't nearly as appealing. Shocking, I know. They fought constantly. He apparently didn't like that she was emotional, and she didn't like that he wasn't taking her seriously. The girl who had told me I was being paranoid because I asked one question was now furious that he wouldn't answer every text within 5 minutes. Karma isn't always cinematic, but sometimes it's just pathetic. I won't pretend I handled everything perfectly. I was angry for a long time. Embarrassed too. There's a special kind of humiliation that comes from being the last person to know your own relationship is a joke. For weeks, every time I saw them around campus, my stomach tightened. I started avoiding certain places. I stopped going to the CAF where we used to study. I had to remind myself not to check my phone every few minutes expecting a message that would explain any of it away. But eventually I realized something important. Her cheating didn't mean I was stupid. It meant she was dishonest. Those are not the same thing. I had trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That's painful, but it's not a character flaw. If anything, the only real mistake I made was ignoring my instincts for too long because I wanted the version of the relationship that existed in my head to be real. I'm not going to pretend it turned me into some hardened, unstoppable guy who never gets hurt. It didn't. I still got burned. I still spent nights replaying the signs and wondering what else I missed. But I also came out of it with a better understanding of what betrayal actually looks like. It's not always screaming. Sometimes it's a smile across a dinner table. Sometimes it's a lie about a group meeting. Sometimes it's making you feel guilty for noticing that something is wrong. That's the part that stuck with me most. Not the cheating itself. The disrespect. If you made it this far, here's the short version. I dated a girl in college for 2 years, she cheated on me with my lab partner, lied about it for weeks, gaslit me when I started to catch on, and then acted shocked when I ended it. It hurt like hell, but I'm glad I found out when I did instead of wasting another year pretending things were fine. And if you're reading this because you're in a relationship that suddenly feels off, trust your gut. People can call you paranoid all they want. Sometimes your instincts are the only honest thing in the room.